From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
President Trump meets with French President Emmanuel Macron at the White House as the world marks 3 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The purpose of our meeting today is to end another battle, a really horrible one, a war.
Melinda Haring of the Atlantic Council joins us ahead with more on the efforts towards peace.
President Trump also says tariffs on Mexico and Canada will go forward next month as the House focuses on taxes with a budget resolution vote set for as soon as tomorrow. Republican Congressman and Budget Committee member Marlin Stutzman will be with us with analysis from Maya MacGuineas of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget.
And unions representing federal employees sue the administration over Elon Musk's demand that government workers email in their accomplishments from the last week or be fired, with some federal agencies now telling staff not to comply with a midnight deadline. Our political panel will weigh in.
Thanks for being with us on this Monday, and we begin with the meeting that took place at the White House this afternoon as President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron discussed negotiations to end the war in Ukraine.
We're working on deals right now, transactions right now, and in particular, the big one is to get the war stopped, whether it's ceasefire or direct to an agreement.
As it is now written and negotiated, and as this meeting is scheduled, is an important step forward, full-fledged peace agreement.
Joining us now with more is Bloomberg's national security reporter, Dan Flatley. So, Dan, it was striking to see these two next to each other, both talking about Europe taking on the burden of ensuring a lasting peace in Ukraine. But it seemed that Macron was making the point the U.S. still had to be involved, and Donald Trump necessarily wasn't fully on board with that, or at least didn't signal that.
Right. Well, we know Trump's position all along has been Europe needs to shoulder more of the burden for defense on the continent, as he's said in the past, including Ukraine, obviously. Today is the 3-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and obviously the reason for President Macron's visit. We expect that the UK Prime Minister will be here later this week to talk with Trump as well. Meanwhile, there is this minerals agreement that is still in the offing between the U.S. and Ukraine, which I think at the end of the day is mostly about shoring up U.S. support for continued support of Ukraine, or at least to keep them involved in the talks. And so I think that was really Macron's message. And he seems to be someone that Trump listens to in the past, and has certainly taken steps to ingratiate himself to the president, inviting him to the unveiling of the new Notre Dame Cathedral and things of that nature. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of this all will be.
We heard today from the Treasury Secretary while meeting the French President. President Trump gave us a bit of an update on the minerals deal between the U.S. and Ukraine. Here's what we said.
The deal's being worked on, and we're, I think, getting very close to getting an agreement where we get our money back over a period of time. But it also gives us something where I think it's very beneficial to their economy, to them as a country. Do you have something to say about that, Scott?
We are very close. The
Good.
1 yard line.
For those of us listening on Bloomberg Radio, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, just off to the side, on the other side of the couch from where Donald Trump was sitting, and a quick back and forth there. Is that true, 1 yard?
Yeah, I think we're, 1 yard line, somewhere in there. I mean, it's always hard to say.
When he was in Kyiv.
Right. I mean, what we know at this point is that the Ukrainians have submitted a draft that they can live with to the U.S. And so we're now, I think, at the stage of where some of those finer details are being worked out. But some things have changed between last week and this week. And one of the things most notably is that the $500 billion agreement for access to Ukraine's critical minerals or important minerals there is no longer part of that agreement, at least in those explicit terms. There's still this idea that the U.S. Will get something for its support over the last 3 years, but it's not put in exactly those terms. Now, whether that remains in the final agreement, we have to see. But, yeah, it seems like things are getting there, although what it ultimately means at the end of the day in terms of material exchange of goods or services or defense or whatnot is changing.
Bloomberg's Dan Flatley. Thank you, Dan, for the update. It'll be interesting to see how Keir Starmer's visit later this week compares with this one. The temporary pause on tariffs, meantime, on imports from Mexico and Canada set to expire on March 4th. Today at the White House, President Trump said as of right now, they are set to go into effect as scheduled. He was asked about this by Bloomberg's Jordan Fabian. Under the plan, a 25% tariff will be imposed on imports from both Mexico and Canada. Joining us now for more, Bloomberg's Laura Davison. How should we read this? Is it just a renewal of the threat? Could they still do something to offset these tariffs?
You can do anything you want in the next week or so before this deal, Trump says will be on time and come to effect. I'll note that same day is also the State of the Union. That's a busy day for the president, so it's very likely that we could see either some movement, or he could either use that platform as a way to speak directly to trading partners to make a case there. We have seen in almost every trade negotiation that has come out so far that the goalposts have moved as time has gone on, and so I think at least Mexico and Canada are hoping they have a little bit more time to come up with some sort of deal.
Well, not a lot of time if you're a federal government employee deciding whether or not you want to respond to this email you received from the Office of Personnel Management. Midnight deadline tonight to describe the week from last week and 5 accomplishments in 5 bullet points and send it in, or face potentially being fired or a presumed resignation. Laura, this was the request from Elon Musk and OPM, yet some agencies are telling staff not to comply with it. So where exactly do we stand with this?
So a couple things that we know from OPM is they have, one, told agency heads you do not need to have your employees respond to this. You can, if you want to, you can. You can also choose to not. 2, OPM has also said that people will not be fired just for a non-response. Any sort of decisions on personnel are also to the agencies. What we're really seeing here is sort of a rift between what Musk is saying by tweet and what the official government guidance that's coming out from what is essentially the government's HR department here. We've seen agencies, the FBI, run by Kash Patel, in his first full day on the job, said, look, don't reply to this, really, kind of getting into this rift here with Musk. Yeah, when Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth are singing a completely different tune than Elon Musk, makes you wonder if, all is well in MAGA Trump administration land. Bloomberg's Laura Davison, thank you so much. And coming up, the House is getting set for a budget resolution vote as soon as tomorrow. We'll be joined by Republican Congressman and Budget Committee member Marlin Stutzman of Indiana and Maya MacGuineas, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Still ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The Republicans' plan is that they are going to fund $4 trillion worth of tax cuts for billionaires by cutting air traffic controllers, by cutting SNAP benefits for low-income mothers and children, and most of all, by taking an absolute chainsaw to Medicaid. And that means primary care visits for kids, that means health care for foster children, and that means at-home care for seniors. Their constituents are going to bludgeon them for it.
Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts last week on Balance of Power, talking about the potential impact of the potential cuts that are needed in order to achieve House Republicans' budget goals. This is all coming together with a very important Rules Committee meeting that's underway late today, and then tomorrow a potential vote on the House floor. And joining us for a closer look is Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana. He's a member of the House Budget Committee and is knee-deep in this debate right now. Congressman, welcome to Bloomberg TV and radio. It's great to have you here. I won't even ask you to comment on what your colleague from Massachusetts said. It's Republicans who are going to get this done right now. And we spoke earlier today with Nicole Malliotakis, a Republican from New York, one of many Republicans who say they don't know if they can vote for this bill because of the potential cuts to Medicaid that would be required to make all of this work. Do you see this actually getting to a vote tomorrow? Do you think that the Republican conference is ready to pass this? Are the votes there?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. And, to address those particular concerns, I've got that same concern, and I know all Republicans on the Budget Committee and in the conference are concerned about cuts going into Medicaid or other benefit programs that our constituents count on those as well. And I'll tell you, I was just home last week and on our district work week, and besides people supporting the fact that DOGE and the Trump team were cleaning up the federal government and eliminating this waste, fraud, and abuse, The number one issue after that was the cost of health care. There is no doubt that health care costs are out of control. Small business owners are trying to figure out what to do. For example, one of our hospital systems told me that 60% of their patients are on Medicaid, but it's only 30% of the revenue for the system. So that kind of tells you how out of whack the Medicaid reimbursements are. So this is an important issue, not just for Democrat districts, it's an important issue for Republican districts as well.
So is this budget then unworkable if it dictates that the House Energy and Commerce Committee needs to find $880 billion worth of cuts, but they shouldn't touch Medicaid? How is the math supposed to work on that, Congressman?
Yeah, no, this is absolutely still workable because, if you talk about the tax rates, these are not additional tax cuts. They're just extending the tax cuts on the rates that happened under the first Trump administration. And that's a really important piece because that would eliminate, if we don't extend those tax rates, it would eliminate the child tax credit for over 40 million Americans. It would cut it in half. And also small businesses, which my family comes from small business, is really dependent on those lower rates. And it's important. We want to grow this economy. That's how we're going to grow out of the mess that we're in. We've got $36 trillion of debt. The budget is so badly out of balance. Trump and the DOGE team are huge supporters of the budget bill that we passed out of the House Budget Committee. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to grow this economy. We need to cut government spending. But we're also going to make sure that these programs that our constituents depend on are going to be healthy. That's really the key. We talk about the MAHA movement. This is about a colonoscopy for the federal government because the federal government needs to be a healthier system to serve the American people.
That's a pretty good line. Congressman, we got new research from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Found the reconciliation instructions pave the way for adding at least $2.8 trillion and up to $4 trillion when it comes to deficits, including interest, through FY 2034. As the small business owner we're talking with right now, as well as the lawmaker, is that something you're comfortable with?
The direction that the federal government's going right now, no one should be comfortable with. And I hear Democrats back home, they all say the same thing. There is waste, fraud, and abuse. They just don't like the tactics that are being taken to address it. But, as a business owner, I know for our struggling companies, we go straight to the source of where the bills are being paid when the money leaves the accounts. And address it from that perspective. And then also we looked at the interest rates. I mean, right now, the interest that we're paying on our federal debt is at 3 1/3%, which is much higher than it has been. That's why we have to get this budget back in balance so that way we don't see higher interest rates. And I appreciate our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, saying that he can go back and negotiate some of these terms because right now we're paying more on our debt service for the federal debt than what we're paying for our military annually. And that's something that's just not sustainable.
I'd like to ask you, Congressman, about how tariffs fit into all of these figures when we're talking about spending and revenue coming in. We heard from the president today that he still does intend to next week implement 25% tariffs on all goods from Mexico and Canada. Of course, Canada and Mexico are the two largest countries receiving exports from your state of Indiana. What is your thought on whether those should go forward, sir?
Yeah, well, I think that President Trump has been doing a remarkable job negotiating the best deal for Americans, whether it's making sure that, there's access to mineral rights in Ukraine for the payback over years and the financial support that we've been giving to Ukraine. I think the lesson that we should all learn is Iraq. We went in and spent treasure and blood in Iraq, but there were no deals for resources to help recoup those. This is we have to look at this as a business transaction that, if we're going to help other countries in other parts of the world, that it's got to be good for the American people as well. I mean, just being at home and driving around the district, I know that these tariffs, I believe what they'll do is they'll actually bring business jobs here to the United States. In fact, the announcement from Apple today is just huge. And the fact that, they're looking at American cities, and right in the Midwest is exciting for us because technology jobs, manufacturing jobs. I come from an ag background. If you can start marrying tech and agriculture together and making sure that our food is healthier for the American people and it's putting more money into American people's pockets, that's a good thing all the way around. So I do trust that Trump is going to use tariffs to negotiate the best deals for the American people.
All right, Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana, thank you so much for joining. And now we want to add a voice of analysis on the House budget resolution we were just discussing with the congressman and turn to Maya MacGuineas, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Maya, it's great to have you. You obviously just heard our conversation, and Joe alluded to the one we had earlier with Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis of New York, who was very worried about the prospect of Medicaid cuts coming as a result of this budget process. This is what she told us about her question on the numbers here, and I'll have you respond.
I still need to get a better understanding and some assurances that we're not going to have impacts on Medicaid recipients in my district. They're already proposing about $1.5 trillion in savings, and they want to do another half a trillion to increase those tax cuts anymore. So that begs the question, where will those savings and cuts come from? And I have a big problem if it's going to be in the Medicaid space. Those are the questions I have at this moment, and they have not been addressed. And so until they're addressed, I'm a lean no.
So, Maya, do you have an answer for this? Where could that $880 billion in cuts really come from?
Well, so the great thing is that we're actually having this discussion because this is what you're supposed to do when you budget. You're supposed to talk about the choices involved and the trade-offs, and we always skirt around these issues. And you hear people saying, one, I care about fiscal responsibility. Two, I want to put in place these multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts. And three, I'm really hesitant to do any of these spending cuts. And those don't add up. So we can do these. I would say, first, let me just say, I don't think we should do any of this first. I think the first thing we should do is put in place a debt deal. We are in trouble fiscally. We shouldn't be cutting taxes. We shouldn't be using spending offsets for cutting taxes instead of a debt deal. Okay, put that to the side. If we want to pass something that's more fiscally responsible, one, absolutely, there are reductions that you can find in Medicaid that are not going to go directly onto the recipients the way people are talking about having to cut benefits, as much as changing some of the structures, provider taxes, the way that we give more money to the states from the federal governments than maybe the program intended. There are a lot of changes that can be made. But two, we can also scale back the price tag of this tax cut. $4.5 trillion, $5 trillion. This makes no sense given our fiscal situation right now. If we want to extend these tax cuts, we should extend the ones that are most pro-growth, most important, and offset a lot of them by broadening the tax base. Just for a little bit of context, though, there's $85 trillion in spending over 10 years. They're cutting $2 trillion out of that. This is not taking a sledgehammer to the government. It's a very small amount. I know it's hard, but this is budgeting. We haven't done it in a long time.
Good context, Maya. I thought you were going to say what they need to do first is craft a budget for this fiscal year. In 18 days, the government runs out of money. Are we heading for a shutdown while we get distracted with reconciliation?
I mean, this is it's honestly crazy, right? The fact that we haven't put a budget in place. We're halfway through the year. We're barreling towards a shutdown. We're talking about debt ceilings. There's no real discussion about that. And here we are looking at trillions of dollars in tax cuts and trillions of dollars of borrowing. They are about to cast a vote that would allow for minimum $2.8 trillion in new borrowing. And they're searching for all sorts of gimmicks like, oh, astronomical growth, or, oh, you shouldn't have to pay for this because we put it in place temporarily and didn't pay for it before, but we shouldn't have to now. Like, so many crazy stories when, yeah, we should be doing a budget before we do anything else. That should be the first step. And I usually don't think we're headed towards a shutdown. I think that it's possible we will have one this time.
Wow. So how soon does all of this in the coming months, Maya, turn into a conversation around the creditworthiness of the United States?
You know, I've been getting that question a lot recently. What are the rating agencies thinking? And you'll recall that we've had downgrades before, not just because of our bad fiscal situation, but because of our fiscal situation combined with our political problems, our gridlock, our lack of ability to govern. I think this year is going to be very focused on the fiscal situations, the risks of making things worse. And we've been hearing from folks in the markets for quite some time that they're very concerned about whether you can absorb the amount of borrowing that is going to be put in place from all these Treasury auctions. Now, markets want two things. They want us to be more fiscally responsible. They also want tax cuts. And it goes back to this over and over. Everybody wants everything. We have to get back in the practice of making some choices. That choice we should be making right now is address the fiscal situation before anything else. And yeah, first step, why don't we pass a budget for the year we're almost halfway through?
Well, boy, I hope people are listening to this because I'm hearing a couple of things from you here, Maya. Well, listen, it's going to be rah-rah between now and, well, a week from tomorrow, right, when the State of the Union, even though we don't call it that in the first go-round, happens here in Washington, D.C. Maybe House Republicans actually get this passed. But then it's going to turn to two things, if I'm reading you right. There's going to be a big freak out about the debt ceiling. We'll be reminded about extraordinary measures. And then we're going to be looking at countdown clocks for a government shutdown. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. And then the end of the year will be there before we know it. We'll have to have another budget put in place. We have all sorts of things expiring. This is a year of a ton of fiscal deadlines. And from what I can see, not a lot of plans for how to handle each one of them.
It's almost like you can predict the future. Maya, it's great to have you back. Maya MacGuineas is president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Thank you so much, as always, for the insights. Coming up, Apple, as we just heard from Congressman Stutzman, says the company plans to spend $500 billion domestically the next 4 years. Will add 20,000 U.S. jobs to ward off tariff threats. We'll have more on that next on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
He's investing hundreds of billions of dollars, and others too. We're going to have a lot of chip makers coming in, a lot of automakers coming in. They stopped 2 plants in Mexico. They were under construction, starting construction. They just stopped them. They're going to build here instead because they don't want to pay the tariffs.
President Trump last week after meeting Apple CEO Tim Cook at the White House. And today, Apple announced it will invest $500 billion domestically over the next 5 years and will hire 20,000 new employees in the U.S. It's a slight acceleration of Apple's previously announced American investment plans.
Yeah, President Trump celebrated the announcement in a social media post saying in all caps, the reason, faith in what we are doing, without which they wouldn't be investing 10 cents. Tim Cook was among the prominent tech CEOs, of course, as we witnessed together to attend President Trump's inauguration last month, also visited Mar-a-Lago after Trump's victory in November. During the first Trump administration, Apple took similar steps to avoid U.S. tariffs on iPhones manufactured overseas. Today, Apple's stock did close up about 1%, whether it was pushed along by this news or not. Not quite 1%, as we see there, Kaylee, because some of this money may well have been previously announced. We're trying to get a sense of how much of this is new dollars.
Yeah, and it very well could be not a lot of it, as we see Apple up just about 0.3% in after-hours trading.
There you have it. Coming up today marks 3 years, as we've been discussing here on Balance of Power, since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We'll take a look at U.S. plans to end the global conflict. Coming up with Melinda Haring of the Atlantic Council. It's next on Bloomberg TV and radio.
A lot of my European colleagues are ready to be engaged, but we do need this American backup because this is part of the credibility of the security guarantees.
I think it's to the very much benefit of Russia to make a deal and to go on with leading Russia in a very positive way. That's what you have to do. But I really believe that he wants to make a deal. Maybe wrong, but I believe he wants to make a deal.
President Trump, French President Macron earlier today at the White House, a news conference we brought to you live here on Bloomberg discussing Vladimir Putin and potentially ending the war in Ukraine. Today marks 3 years since Russia's invasion, as President Trump re-emphasized that a peace deal is close. In his conversations today with reporters, joining us now is Melinda Haring, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and a voice of authority on what's happening inside Ukraine. Melinda, it's great to have you back. Donald Trump believes, as he just said, Putin wants a deal. What leads us to believe that might be true? Anything?
Hey, Joe. So it's hard to make this case. Donald Trump thinks so, and he says that he thinks that Putin wants a deal, but I don't see a lot of evidence for it. It's true that the United States is the #1 backer when it comes to arms in Ukraine. So if Trump pulls the rug from under the Ukrainians, it's going to be hard for Kiev to prosecute the war at the same levels of intensity. But that doesn't mean that Ukraine is going to stop fighting.
Well, Melinda, it strikes me that we're kind of talking about two deals simultaneously here. One being the deal that the U.S. is working on negotiating directly with Russia. The other being this deal over minerals or some kind of money returning to the United States in exchange for the support it's provided Ukraine to this point. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers made the comparison between President Trump's current plans in Ukraine and the post-World War I Treaty of Versailles. This is what he told us, and we'll have you respond.
What the Trump administration seems to be proposing, and to be fair, we have not seen all the details, is Versailles, a Versailles-like agreement imposed not on aggressors, but imposed on the victims of aggression. The victims of aggression to whom the United States, in the face of the world, made solemn promises to.
Melinda, I wonder if you agree with that characterization and how you might explain Ukraine, according to the Treasury Secretary, being at the 1 yard line with the U.S. on making some kind of agreement like this.
Haley, I think that you nailed it. There's more than one deal being talked about. So the mineral deal that was in the news over the weekend looks like it's likely to be signed between Ukraine and the United States pretty soon. Trump said today that he thinks it's only a matter of days before it will be signed. The deal is one-sided. It doesn't make a ton of sense from a Ukrainian perspective. However, the Ukrainians feel like they need to go along with it in order to get on Trump's good side. There's also the question, though, about European security. And we saw that big story here in Washington today as Emmanuel Macron was in the Oval Office talking to Donald Trump. And as the United States plays a lesser and lesser role in Europe, the Europeans have to step up. They have to step up and start providing their own security. So that's the other big headline today as well.
I want to ask you, Melinda, about the man who's not at the table and was not in the East Room today, for that matter, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who spoke over the weekend here, volunteering that he would step down. I'm sure you heard this, if needed to achieve peace in his country. Here's what he said.
To achieve peace, if you really need me to give up my post, I'm ready. I can trade it for NATO membership if there are such conditions. I am focused on Ukraine's security today, not in 20 years. I am not going to be in power for decades.
Maybe we should break this into two here. Peace in one bucket, a potential NATO membership in another bucket. Which would be realistic if he were to leave?
So, Joe, I think he's actually talking about something else. Last week, the whole criticism of Zelensky is that he's not a Democrat and that Ukraine doesn't have real elections and that Ukraine should hold elections ASAP. That was one of the demands that we were seeing from Trump world. So I think that's what he's responding to. Let me respond to that. So Ukraine is a democracy. It has vibrant and free elections every 5 years. The elections were suspended under martial law when the war broke out. They haven't had elections since 2019. As soon as martial law is lifted, Ukraine can hold elections. And it's worth saying that Volodymyr Zelensky won the vote in 2019 with 73% of the vote. And Joe, you know me, I've been asking everyone, is it possible to hold elections under the current configuration that Ukraine is under? So the Russians hold 20% of Ukraine. They have illegally annexed 20% of the country. Plus, there are 6 million Ukrainians living abroad in Europe. Can you hold free and fair elections? I was laughed out of the room when I asked a bunch of elections experts that question. It is a ploy to try to get rid of Zelensky, and it was concocted in Moscow, Russia. So that's why this push, that's why Zelensky is sort of subtly trying to say, look, it's not about me. I'm willing to step out of the way if I can get security guarantees for my country. Now, is it a real offer? I don't think so, because Germany and the United States are not going to allow NATO membership for Ukraine in the next 8 to 10 years, unfortunately.
Melinda, you referenced the 20% of the country that has been annexed by Russia. Do you sense a feeling on the part of the Ukrainians that they would actually realistically, under some kind of deal, be able to capture or retake any of that territory to have it once again defined as Ukrainian territory, or are they willing to give some of it at least up?
So let me flip the question a little bit, Kaylee. So I've been looking into what the Russians think of this annexed territory. And the sentiment is the Russian side doesn't care about this territory and they don't want to pay for the reconstruction of this territory. It's heavily damaged. It is where a lot of the minerals and resources in Ukraine are, which makes it highly desirable. But I think it's important to drill down into the potential peace negotiations. So what Russia wants and what it previously offered is the Istanbul Agreement back in early of 2022. And that agreement states that Ukraine would be neutral. And it also states that Ukraine would not politically or militarily try to retake that 20% of the illegally annexed land. So Ukraine would basically say, we're not going to try to touch this. And they would probably pursue the Baltic model. And that means that international recognition would not follow. And eventually the territory would come back under Ukraine's legal ownership.
Interesting optics today at the White House, Melinda. The lack of pomp for Emmanuel Macron as he arrived at the West Wing, very workmanlike sort of welcome, remembering the state dinner and all the rest that he got from President Biden at the start of his term. Keir Starmer shows up Thursday. Will there be more warmth in the air?
Absolutely. So Donald Trump is crazy about the royalty, so I expect them to go all out on Thursday. The thing I'm watching for, Joe, though, on Thursday is about the issue of troops on the ground in Ukraine. So last week, the Europeans called an emergency meeting in Paris on Monday. Emmanuel Macron said, everyone come to the table. The U.S. doesn't have our back anymore. And we don't see any unity when it comes to the Europeans and Ukraine, which is a big problem. So the British have said, we will put troops in Ukraine, but we need an American backing. And the Americans have said, no way. The Poles have said they're not going to put troops in Europe either. So everyone's sort of all over the place. Fast forward a week later, the Europeans are finally starting to get their act together, and they've authorized at least a $20.9 billion euro package for Ukraine. And this is supposed to be just the start.
All right, Melinda Haring, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Thank you for joining us as we mark 3 years of this war, now entering a fourth. And coming up, the DOGE email that asks more than 2 million federal workers to justify their job or risk dismissal. Apparently, they don't have to respond by midnight now, but we'll get into it with our signature political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I thought it was great, because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows if they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? There was a lot of genius in sending it. We're trying to find out if people are working.
President Trump earlier today reacting to an email sent by the Office of Personnel Management this weekend that instructed more than 2 million federal workers to submit 5 bullet points explaining what they accomplished in their jobs last week. It followed a next post from Elon Musk, who said failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. But OPM is now saying that a response is voluntary. So let's get into this now with our signature political panel here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, who's a Stone Court Capital partner and Republican strategist, alongside Jeannie Shanzano, Democratic analyst and senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. Welcome to you both. I guess we may not get that many emails that reveal what government employees spent their time doing last week, Rick, but we did get revealed something else, which was a bit of a break in this administration. Elon Musk says one thing. Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth, the leaders now of departments saying workers don't need to follow what Elon Musk says.
Well, I think there was a rationale for security agencies and intelligence agencies to say, we don't want them writing down what they did the last 5 days. But what was really interesting is the no-name, Office of Personnel Management, the HR department for 2 million people, swatted him down and said, no one has to answer this question. And so you have Elon Musk way out there and like President, backing him up 100%. And an hour later, a memo goes out to all 2 million people saying you don't need to do a thing. So it's really interesting to me that the president didn't know this was coming. Elon Musk didn't have any kind of vetting through this process to get this out to begin with. I mean, it is starting to look like a competency issue. And I think that's one thing they've got to worry about. I love the speed, but, don't keep tripping over yourself.
Jeannie, I'm not sure how many Americans could come up with 5 bullets to defend their jobs, specifically to what they did last week. But with everything that Rick just said, did Elon Musk just peak?
Yeah, it's fascinating because in the private sector, of course, the people are very used to this, right? You have to do an annual review. You have to respond. Usually it's not the 5 things you did last week. Usually it's the 5 things you did last year. But of course, in the public sector, it's very different. There are state laws, federal laws and regulations. And so the idea that if you don't respond to an email within a short period of time and reflect this, that you have just put in your resignation is, of course, probably a non-starter in front of the courts. And then, of course, what Rick was talking about, I would call a problem of execution, because the reality is execution matters. And we've been hearing this even from some Republicans. We heard it from the new senator from Utah. We heard it from Jesse Waters, of all people, on Fox News, saying, we all appreciate efficiency. We all appreciate cutbacks, but you don't have to be cruel to do it. And the way in which you do it matters. And I think that's the wall that Elon Musk and DOGE may run into at this point.
Yeah, Jeannie, alluding to what we heard from Senator Curtis on Face the Nation yesterday. Rick, do they have a point with that compassion matters here, that it does play back home in districts, especially for people who are trying to get reelected next year?
Well, even senators were paying attention to the House break last week. And when the House members went back, a number of them had very, very tumultuous town halls. Because that's what they do. They go home and they listen to their constituents, and they come back different. And they definitely came back a little different on this issue, because a lot of town hall spokespeople were saying, you know what, these are our benefits that are being cut and slashed, and everybody playing around with chainsaws. That doesn't impress us. And so, if you're going to affect me and what I get out of the federal government, I'm not too happy about it. And they were pretty vocal about it. And so senators who are smart are going to listen to what happens in their states at the House level and say, you know what, I see the way the people are moving, and they're not moving in the right direction. And you'll notice everybody is trying to get a poll out that says, oh, no, all this is just fine with everybody. Nah, believe your eyes.
That was the first question, interestingly, at the news conference today by a certain reporter. Donald Trump wanted to talk about the Harvard-Harris poll. He also talked about tariffs during a meeting with Emmanuel Macron. Had this update on the proposed tariffs specifically for Mexico and Canada, remembering they went into a 30-day review period set to be imposed next month. Here's what he said.
The tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States?
On time, on schedule, Rick. He was, to be clear, answering a question from a reporter. That wasn't something that he had in prepared remarks. Has anything actually changed? And could Canada and Mexico presumably still turn this around?
Look, I mean, with Donald Trump, everything is something that can be turned around until not, right? And we've got, till March 4th before the effective date of these. The same day he intends to address Congress. So maybe that's the lead line, is today these tariffs go into effect on our closest territory trading partners.
I've received more concessions.
Right, or I've gotten concessions. So he can't lose, really, in the process. And look, there are legitimate concerns about the lack of reciprocity in our trading arrangements, especially with our largest trading partners, China, Mexico, and Canada. So I think he's trying to address an issue that is very complex, because when you do these overall tariffs, how do they then catch up to the reciprocal tariffs that are also going to be backing up? And I know the Treasury Department is probably working overtime to figure out how do we set the dials on this so that we actually know the outcome is legitimate?
Well, and I'm sure other countries are watching as well, Jeannie, trying to figure out if they can spot a tell here on the part of the president to figure out whether or not he's bluffing this time.
Yeah, and of course, I'm just shocked to hear Joe say that it's going to almost be a month. It feels like they just got the reprieve, and to hear it's up so soon is shocking. But yeah, I think all countries in all different ways, whether it's about tariffs, whether it's about foreign policy, are trying to feel out Donald Trump. But I think one thing we've seen, at least in the month or so he's been in office, is that he is willing to go to the mat, particularly on these tariffs, and he is willing to deal. And we saw him do that with this 30-day reprieve. So I think it is an opportunity for both Canada and Mexico and the leaders there to negotiate with the president in terms of trying to figure this out. Of course, the president also has to be cognizant. You just think of a state like Michigan, which he won. He has to be very careful about the impact of something like tariffs on Canada and the impact on the state. So those things also come into play here.
I'm glad you mentioned the speech. It's a week from tomorrow. It's a big night for him. They're crafting that speech now. What's happening behind the scenes in the White House ahead of this moment for Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, this is always a big moment in a White House to get the policies and the messages that you want to be able to communicate. They know that this is going to be one of the most watched moments of his first year in this term of office. And I think that you have to sort of like think about this moment for him as J.D. Vance's moment was in Munich recently, his chance to sort of reset the table, create an approach that is uniquely Trump for the United States. And we've seen pieces of that, the trade, the tariffs, the Ukraine, the attitude toward Europe, the rapprochement with Russia. I mean, all these things are going to be gathered up into one big ideological speech that Donald Trump is going to give to Congress. And I think people are going to be impacted by that. And the question is he going to be dark and gloomy like he is many times when he speaks? Right. Or is he going to try and say, this is now my administration and things are going to be better?
Well, and I wonder, too, Jeannie, as he talks about everything he wants to accomplish over the next 4 years, or more immediately in this first year, how much it matters if the House of Representatives that he is in part addressing is able to pass a budget resolution this week leading up to his speech or not.
Yeah, I think it's going to matter a lot. We were just calculating that it's, 10 days before a government shutdown by the time he speaks in front of Congress. That's going to be weighing very heavily in Congress. Of course, the resolution, I mean, those are two big things. And let's not forget, when Mike Johnson pushed the issue of government funding to the March deadline, he said it was going to be done way before then. And now we are, 18 days to go now. So that is certainly going to be a big issue. And I think one thing I'm curious about overall in this speech is, does he continue what we heard under the Biden administration, where these states of the union started to feel less like a speech and more like a question and answer period, or like a, back and forth between the audience in Congress and the president? Because we heard an awful lot about that. All four of us were together last time. That's what it felt like. And I wonder if that continues again next week when President Trump goes before Congress.
The old call and response. We will be back together again next Tuesday. Join Kaylee, myself, Rick Davis, and Jeannie Shanzano for special coverage when President Trump addresses a joint session of Congress. Coming up, we'll have a look at what's next for the House tax and spend plan we've been talking about. It's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Finding the right point for all those dials is going to be the trick over the next several weeks. We'll get there, and the sooner that we do, the better it's going to be for you and every small business owner, and large company for that matter, around the country, because that's going to lock in and codify the certainty that you need to be able to do what you do best, and that is grow your business and add jobs.
The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, they're all back in town today, along with the Speaker, with big plans on how to keep his coalition together, as he was just describing, on a budget reconciliation plan, despite an incredibly slim margin. The real test is now. The plan as it stands is to bring the bill to a floor vote tomorrow. But, Kaylee, it's got to get through the Rules Committee first. That could mean a late night tonight.
Yeah, that markup in the Rules Committee is happening this evening. So that is one hurdle to get over. Then, of course, you have to get the votes on the House floor. And there are a number of Republicans who, over concerns about potential cuts to Medicare spending, have suggested they're not yet yeses on this bill. One of them being Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, the Republican from New York, who also talked about a further hurdle, reconciling this package with the one that passed the Senate.
The Senate already passed a different version that includes no money for tax cuts. So we have two different versions here. So eventually we're going to have to get to one version that passes both houses. So really, in a way, we're taking this vote, and even if it passes, it most likely is not the final version, because I don't see the Senate taking that up, which means we'd have to come together and hash out something that's in the middle.
So we all have to stay tuned on this one, and we'll probably have more to tell you come this time tomorrow. In the meantime, check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
There'll be great tales from the Rules Committee for sure. We'll have a lot to review tomorrow, so do join us again on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.